The morning shift alarm echoed through the central hub of Galactic Academy Station as Instructor Krell made his way to Orientation Hall. His 4 arms carried data pads containing safety protocols he had taught for 20 cycles. Today would be different, though he did not yet know how different. The Orientation Hall filled with students from across the galaxy. Krell watched them enter, his trained eyes noting each species and their specific needs. The Chitters arrived first, their 6 legs clicking nervously on the metal floor. Behind them came the Vorthons, floating in their methane suits, the gas inside swirling with their anxiety. The Lumens drifted in last, their crystalline bodies reflecting the station lights in rainbow patterns. Then the human entered. Krell had read the files about Earth and its inhabitants, but seeing one in person was entirely different. The human was male, stood on 2 legs and wore the standard Academy uniform. His name was Derek according to the roster. What struck Krell immediately was how plain the human looked. No natural armor, no protective gas cloud, no hard shell. Just soft skin exposed to the air. Every safety sensor in the hall immediately turned yellow, then orange. The biological scanner flagged Derek as a contamination risk. The atmosphere monitor registered his breath as containing dangerous levels of oxygen. The radiation detector marked his body as carrying toxic bacteria. Krell had never seen so many warnings for a single student. Derek walked to an empty seat and sat down, completely unaware of the alerts he had triggered. The other students shifted away from him slightly, their instincts warning them of danger even if they did not understand why. Krell cleared his throat, a sound that came out as a wet gurgle through his breathing apparatus. "Welcome to Galactic Academy Station," he began. "I am Instructor Krell, and I will ensure you survive your time here." The word survive made several students twitch. A young chitter named Zilk wrapped 2 of her legs around the seat in front of her for comfort. "This station orbits a Class G star," Krell continued, bringing up a holographic display. "The radiation from this star can kill most of you in under 3 minutes without proper shielding. Our hull protects you, but you must never approach the outer observation decks during solar flares." Around the room, students made notes with whatever appendages their species used for writing. Derek pulled out a simple paper notebook and a pen. Krell found this odd. Most species use digital systems. "The station maintains artificial gravity at 0.8 galactic standard," Krell said, gesturing to the floor. "This is comfortable for most species. However, if gravity systems fail, you have approximately 90 seconds to reach a safety pod before the sudden shift to zero gravity causes your internal organs to rupture." Several students made sounds of distress. One Vorthon's methane suit bubbled more rapidly, showing fear. Derek wrote something in his notebook and nodded slightly. Krell moved to the next slide. "Atmospheric composition is carefully controlled. We maintain a nitrogen-oxygen mix that supports 70% of known species. The other 30% must wear breathing apparatus at all times. If you smell anything sweet, leave the area immediately. That is a sign of life support failure, and you will have less than 2 minutes before unconsciousness." A lumen pulsed with a worried orange color. Zilk made a small chirping sound of terror. Derek underlined something in his notes. "Pressure is maintained at 1.1 standard," Krell continued. "Hull breaches are rare but possible. If you hear the breach alarm, you must reach a sealed section within 45 seconds. Decompression will pull the air from your lungs and freeze your bodily fluids almost instantly." Now even the bravest students looked pale, or whatever color their species turned when frightened. Krell noticed Derek had stopped taking notes and was simply listening with his arms crossed. "Chemical storage is located in sections 7 through 9, Krell said. "These areas are restricted. Many compounds we use for fuel and research are corrosive to organic tissue. A single drop of hyperfuel on exposed skin will burn through to bone in under 5 seconds. Zilk raised one of her forelimbs. "Instructor, how do we protect ourselves from all these dangers?" "By following every protocol exactly," Krell replied firmly. "By never taking risks. By understanding that this station, while safe when properly maintained, exists in an environment that wants to kill you. Space has no mercy." Derek raised his hand. It was the first time he had moved since sitting down. "Yes, human Derek?" Krell asked, curious what the strange creature wanted to know. "What temperature does the station maintain?" Derek asked. His voice was calm, showing no fear. 22 degrees Celsius, Krell answered. "Comfortable for most species. Why do you ask?" "Just wondering," Derek said. "That is pretty nice." Krell found this response odd. He continued his presentation, showing images of past accidents. A fire in the engineering deck that had reached 300 degrees and killed 2 researchers. A coolant leak that had frozen an entire laboratory to minus 100 degrees in minutes. A radiation pulse that had contaminated a storage bay. With each image, the students grew more nervous. Some were visibly shaking. One Vorthan excused himself, saying he felt sick. But Derek sat calmly, occasionally writing a note but mostly just watching the presentation with mild interest. "Are there any questions?" Krell finally asked, reaching the end of his standard orientation. Dozens of hands, claws, and tentacles rose into the air. Students asked about emergency procedures, medical facilities, and evacuation routes. They asked about protective gear and safety drills. They asked how many students had died in previous cycles. Derek did not raise his hand. When the other students had asked their questions and left for their dormitories, Derek stood and walked toward the exit. "Human Derek," Krell called out. "A moment, please." Derek turned and walked back. "Yes, instructor?" "You asked no questions about safety," Krell observed. "Are you not concerned about the dangers I described?" Derek thought for a moment, then shrugged. It was a gesture Krell had learned meant uncertainty or dismissal among humans. "It all seems pretty manageable," Derek said. "The station has good systems in place." "Manageable?" Krell repeated. "I described scenarios that would kill you in seconds." "Sure," Derek agreed. "But you also said they were rare if protocols are followed. Besides, the temperature is stable, the air is breathable, and gravity is consistent. Seems like a safe environment to me." Krell stared at the human. Every other student had left terrified, and this creature from Earth called the station safe. "Your homeworld must be very secure," Krell said. Derek smiled. "Not really. But I will learn your protocols, instructor. See you tomorrow." As the human left, Krell pulled up Derek's file again. He read the classification for Earth and its rating as a Class 12 death world. He had thought it was an error in the database. Now he was not so sure. He made a note in his daily report about the human's unusual calm in the face of mortal danger and wondered what kind of world could produce such a creature. The laboratory wing of Galactic Academy Station hummed with the sound of ventilation systems and quiet student chatter. Instructor Krell stood at the front of the room, watching his 12 students prepare for their first practical chemistry session. Safety equipment hung on every wall. Emergency showers stood ready in each corner. The room was designed to handle disasters. Derek sat at a workstation between Zilk the Chitter and a Vorthan named Session. The methane breather's suit made soft hissing sounds as Sess moved delicate tools with their gas-filled tentacles. Zilk kept all 6 of her legs firmly planted on the floor, her antenna twitching nervously. "Today we work with basic compounds," Krell announced, his 4 arms distributing sealed containers to each workstation. "These chemicals are used throughout the galaxy for cleaning and maintenance. They are relatively safe when handled properly." He emphasized the word relatively, and several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You will mix solution A with solution B in the provided containment vessel," Krell continued. "This creates a mild cleaning agent. Follow the measurements exactly. Do not deviate from the procedure. Do not remove your safety gloves. Do not allow any chemical to touch your skin." Derek pulled on the safety gloves provided, though they were clearly too large for human hands. He had to fold the fingers back to use his tools properly. The gloves were designed for species with claws or chitinous appendages. Around the room, students began their work with extreme care. Each movement was slow and calculated. Zilk measured her chemicals 3 times before pouring anything. Sess used 4 different tentacles to ensure stability while mixing. Derek read through the procedure once, then began working at a normal pace. He poured solution A into his container, then added solution B. The mixture bubbled slightly and turned a pale green color. Exactly as the instructions described. "Remember," Krell called out, walking between the workstations. "If you spill even a drop, step back and call for help. These compounds can burn through organic tissue." At the back of the room, a lumen named Prex was struggling. The crystalline being had trouble manipulating the liquid containers with their hard, angular limbs. Prex tried to pour solution A, but the angle was wrong. The container slipped. It fell in what seemed like slow motion, bouncing off the edge of the workstation. The seal broke when it hit the floor. Bright blue liquid spread across the metal tiles, releasing a sharp smell that made several students choke. "Breach! Chemical breach!" Krell shouted, his voice activating the emergency alarm. Red lights flashed throughout the laboratory. A recorded voice began counting down the evacuation procedure. Students scrambled toward the exits, abandoning their workstations. Zilk's legs tangled with each other in her panic. Sess floated toward the door so quickly they bounced off the wall. Prex stood frozen at their station, their crystalline body pulsing with a panicked purple color. The spilled chemical was spreading, its edges smoking slightly as it reacted with the metal floor. Derek looked at the spill, then at the fleeing students, then back at the spill. He stood up calmly and walked toward the breach instead of away from it. Human Derek, evacuate immediately. Krell commanded, already moving toward the door himself. Derek ignored the order. He grabbed a container of Solution C from the supply shelf and read the label quickly. Then he picked up a spray bottle of neutralizing agent and walked directly to the spreading chemical. Derek, that substance will dissolve your flesh. Krell shouted from the doorway. Derek knelt down about 2 feet from the edge of the spill, well within what Krell considered the danger zone. He sprayed the neutralizing agent in a circle around the spill, containing its spread. Then he carefully poured Solution C onto the blue liquid in a steady stream. The reaction was immediate. The blue chemical turned gray, then white, then began solidifying into a chalky substance. The sharp smell faded. Within 30 seconds, what had been a deadly spill was now a harmless powder on the floor. Derek stood up, brushed off his knees, and walked to the cleaning supply closet. He returned with a dustpan and brush, then swept up the neutralized powder and deposited it in the chemical waste container. The entire process took less than 2 minutes. The laboratory fell silent except for the still blaring alarm. Krell stumbled back into the room and manually shut off the alert. The red light stopped flashing. In the doorway, every student stared at Derek with wide eyes, or whatever their species used for seeing. How did you know to do that? Krell finally asked, his voice weak with shock. Derek looked confused by the question. The neutralizing agent is clearly labeled, he said. And Solution C is a basic alkaline compound. The spill was acidic. Basic chemistry says they neutralize each other. But the danger, Krell said. You could have been injured or killed. Not really, Derek replied, walking back to his workstation. I stayed clear of the actual spill. The fumes were not strong enough to be harmful at that distance. And I could tell from the smoke pattern that it was not reacting too quickly with the floor, so I had time to work. Zilk made a small chirping sound. But that chemical is rated as highly corrosive to biological tissue. Derek nodded. Sure, but so is the drain cleaner we use in kitchen sinks back home. Or bathroom tile cleaner. Or oven cleaner. You just do not touch it directly and you handle it carefully. Your kitchen has corrosive chemicals? Cess asked through their translator, their methane suit bubbling with confusion. Well, yeah, Derek said. How else would you clean grease and organic buildup? Some stains need strong chemicals to remove. Krell felt his breathing apparatus working harder than usual. Are you telling me that humans keep substances this dangerous in their homes? They are not that dangerous if you use them correctly, Derek said. My mom kept bottles of this stuff under the sink. The labels say to wear gloves and not get it in your eyes. Basic safety. Under the sink, Krell repeated slowly, where a child could reach them. The bottles have child-proof caps, Derek explained as if this made everything reasonable. Prex, still standing at their workstation, pulsed with an amazed yellow color. You have experience with such chemicals? You are trained in hazardous material handling? Derek laughed. Not trained exactly. I just cleaned bathrooms as a chore when I was growing up. My dad taught me how to mix cleaners safely when I was maybe 10 years old. 10 cycles. Krell asked. You were still a juvenile? 10 years, yeah, Derek confirmed. Pretty normal age to start doing chores. The instructor walked slowly to Derek's workstation and examined the neutralized powder in the waste container. The human had handled a crisis in seconds that should have required a full hazmat team. He had done it with the same casual confidence someone might show washing dishes. On your world, Krell said carefully, what do you consider a dangerous chemical? Derek thought about it. I guess stuff that is really unstable or radioactive or biological weapons. Things that can hurt you even when handled correctly. An acid that burns through metal floors? That is just cleaning product, Derek said. You wear gloves and do not splash it around. Pretty simple. Krell made a long note in his data pad. The human species, he wrote, has evolved in an environment so hostile that they consider corrosive chemicals to be household items. Their danger assessment is severely skewed compared to galactic norms. Recommend extreme caution in evaluating what humans consider safe. Around the room, students slowly returned to their workstations. They all gave Derek's station a much wider space than before. Not because they feared him exactly, but because they were beginning to realize that his entire existence came from a world they could barely imagine surviving for even a day. The field trip to the Gravity Regulation Center was supposed to be educational and safe. Instructor Krell had brought his class to observe the massive generators that kept the station at a comfortable 0.8 galactic standard. The students stood on an observation platform, looking down at the three enormous cylinders that spun silently in their magnetic housings. Derek stood near the railing next to Zilk and Cess, watching the technical displays with interest. A lumen named Prex floated beside them, pulsing with curious green colors. Two other students, an insectoid called Trix and a crystalline being named Ven, examined the control panels under Krell's supervision. These generators must never fail, Krell explained, gesturing with two of his forearms. A sudden shift in gravity would be catastrophic. That is why we have triple redundancy and constant monitoring. The words were barely out of his mouth when the lights flickered. A deep grinding sound echoed through the chamber. One of the generators began spinning faster, its smooth rotation becoming erratic. The second generator slowed dramatically. The third stuttered, speeding up and slowing down in irregular pulses. Emergency, a calm computer voice announced. Gravity systems experiencing malfunction. Technicians have been notified. The observation platform lurched. Derek grabbed the railing as the floor seemed to tilt, though he knew it was gravity itself shifting. Around him, students cried out in alarm. Then the real chaos began. The chamber divided into zones of wildly different gravitational pull. Near the malfunctioning first generator, gravity suddenly increased to 3 times galactic standard. The second generator created a pocket of zero gravity. The third generator's erratic pulses made gravity fluctuate every few seconds between crushing weight and weightlessness. Krell, standing near the control panel, found himself in the heavy gravity zone. His legs buckled under the sudden pressure. His forearms could barely move. "Students," he gasped into his communicator. "Stay where you are. Do not move." But the platform itself was breaking apart. The gravity fluctuations were tearing at the metal supports. Students who had been standing together moments before were now separated by invisible walls of force. Zilk had been thrown into the zero-gravity zone. Her 6 legs flailed uselessly as she spun in the air, unable to grab onto anything. Her species had evolved in normal gravity and she had no instincts for flying. She was making high-pitched sounds of terror. Cess floated nearby, but the Vorthan's methane suit was cracking under the stress. Without proper gravity to stabilize the internal pressure, the suit was expanding dangerously. Cess would suffocate if the suit ruptured. Trix had fallen into the heavy gravity zone near Krell. The insectoid's thin exoskeleton was never meant to support 3 times normal weight. Derek could hear the crack as one of Trix's legs broke under the pressure. The student screamed in pain. Prex and Ven were caught in the fluctuating zone. Every few seconds they were slammed to the floor by crushing gravity, then thrown into the air as gravity disappeared. Their crystalline bodies were tough, but even they could not withstand being smashed repeatedly against metal. Derek had managed to stay in a relatively stable area near the platform's edge where gravity remained close to normal. He assessed the situation quickly. The injured students could not reach safety on their own. The zones of dangerous gravity separated them from the exits. And Krell was pinned down, unable to help. "I am calling emergency rescue," Krell wheezed from where he lay on the floor. "Stay put, all of you." Derek ignored the instruction. He studied the gravity zones, watching how they shifted and pulsed. There was a pattern to the fluctuations. Not regular but predictable if you paid attention. He could see a path. He took off his jacket and shoes. The less weight the better. "Derek, do not move," Krell shouted, seeing what the human intended. Derek jumped into the zero-gravity zone, pushing off the platform with his legs. He sailed through the air toward Zilk, who was still spinning helplessly. In zero gravity, he moved like someone who had done this before, twisting his body to control his direction. He caught Zilk gently, stopping her spin. "Hold very still," he told her. She wrapped 4 of her legs around his torso, gripping tight. Then Derek grabbed a piece of broken railing that was floating nearby and threw it hard in one direction. The equal and opposite reaction pushed him and Zilk toward the edge of the zero-gravity zone. Physics worked the same everywhere. They crossed into normal gravity and Derek landed hard on a stable section of platform, absorbing the impact with his legs. He set Zilk down in a safe corner. "Stay here," he said. Before anyone could protest, Derek ran toward the heavy gravity zone. As he crossed the boundary, the weight hit him like a physical blow. His body suddenly weighed 3 times normal. Every step became a struggle. But Derek had trained in Earth's gravity, which was already heavier than galactic standard. And he had been hiking in mountains where thin air made every movement difficult. He knew how to push through when his body felt heavy. He dropped to his hands and knees, distributing his weight. He crawled toward Trix, moving slowly but steadily. The insectoid's eyes were wide with pain and shock. "This will hurt," Derek warned. He carefully lifted Trix onto his back, ignoring the broken leg that dangled uselessly. The combined weight of his body and the injured student made him feel like he was carrying a mountain. His muscles screamed in protest. Derek crawled back toward the normal gravity zone, inch by painful inch. Sweat poured down his face. His arms shook with effort. But he kept moving. When he finally crossed back into normal gravity, he felt like he had been released from chains. He carried Trix to where Zilk waited and set the insectoid down gently. "Two down," Derek muttered, breathing hard. The fluctuating zone was next. Derek timed the pulses, counting the seconds between gravity shifts. 5 seconds of crushing weight. 3 seconds of zero gravity. 5 seconds of crushing weight. 3 seconds of zero gravity. He waited for the zero gravity phase, then sprinted into the zone. He reached Prex first, grabbed the lumen, and used the momentum to jump toward Venerable. The gravity returned and slammed them all to the floor. Derek felt something in his shoulder pop, but he held on to both crystalline students. Zero gravity came again. Derek pushed off the floor with his legs, launching all three of them toward safety. They flew through the air. The gravity returned just as they crossed the boundary. They crashed onto the stable platform in a heap. Derek stood up slowly, his shoulder throbbing. 3 students safe. 2 to go. Cess was in the zero-gravity zone, but the Vorthan's suit was nearly ruptured. Derek could see cracks spreading across the material. He had maybe 30 seconds before total failure. He jumped back into zero gravity, moving fast. He reached Cess and wrapped his arms around the entire suit, holding the cracks together with pressure. Then he pushed off a wall and guided them both back to safety. The moment they landed in normal gravity, Derek ripped his shirt off and wrapped it tightly around the worst crack in Cess's suit. It was not a perfect seal, but it would hold for a few minutes. "Stay calm," Derek told the Vorthan. "Breathe slowly to conserve your methane." That left only Krell. The instructor was still pinned in the heavy gravity zone, barely conscious. Derek went back in, crawling on his belly this time to stay lower. He reached Krell and grabbed 2 of the instructor's forearms. "This is insane," Krell whispered. "You cannot carry me." "Probably not," Derek agreed. "But I can drag you." He pulled. Krell's body moved across the floor slowly. Derek's injured shoulder felt like it was on fire. His muscles were beyond exhaustion. But he kept pulling 1 painful inch at a time. When they finally crossed into normal gravity, Derek collapsed beside Krell, gasping for air. His body was shaking. His shoulder was definitely dislocated. His hands were bleeding from gripping the metal floor. Emergency crews arrived 2 minutes later to find all the students alive in a safe zone, with a human lying among them looking like he had just run a marathon while carrying boulders. The medic, a 4-eyed creature named Plix, scanned Derek with growing disbelief. "You crossed multiple gravity zones," Plix said. "These readings show you experienced forces that should have crushed your bones." Derek sat up slowly, cradling his injured shoulder. "Earth gravity is pretty strong," he said simply. "And I did track in high school. Lots of strength training." Krell stared at the human from where the medics were treating him. "You saved all of us," he said quietly. Derek shrugged with his good shoulder, then winced at the pain. "You said we were a team. Teams do not leave people behind." Around them, the other students looked at Derek with something beyond respect. They were looking at him the way prey animals might look at a predator who had chosen to protect them instead of hunt them. He was not just different. He was something they were beginning to understand their galaxy had never encountered before. A creature from a world so harsh that impossible conditions were merely inconvenient. The research wing of Galactic Academy Station was the quietest section, located on the outer rim where students could observe deep space through reinforced viewports. Derek sat at a table with 5 other students, working on a project about stellar formation. Outside the thick windows, stars stretched into infinity. Instructor Krell had relaxed slightly around Derek after the gravity incident, though he still watched the human with a mixture of respect and concern. Today he had assigned group work, pairing students from different species to encourage cooperation. Derek worked alongside Zilk, Cess, Prex, and 2 newer students named Ven and Cass. They were building a model of a solar system, using holographic projectors and physical materials. The work was peaceful and calm. "I think we should place the 4th planet here," Zilk suggested, moving a small sphere with one of her delicate legs. Derek nodded, making notes in his ever-present paper notebook. Cess floated nearby in their repaired methane suit, adjusting the holographic star at the center of their model. Prex pulsed with a contented blue color, organizing data on a tablet. Outside something changed. The first meteor was small, no bigger than a pebble. It struck the station's outer shielding and vaporized instantly. The second meteor followed 3 seconds later. Then the third. Then dozens more. Meteor storm, the computer voice announced calmly. All personnel move to interior sections. This is not a drill. The viewports automatically shuttered, thick metal plates sliding down to protect the glass. Red warning lights began flashing. In the hallway outside the research room, students and staff hurried toward the central core of the station where the hull was thicker. Quickly now, Krell called to his students. Leave your work and head to the safe zone. The students gathered their belongings and moved toward the door. Derek was helping Zilk carry some of their equipment when the impact happened. A meteor the size of a human fist punched through the station's outer shielding. The shields were designed to stop small debris, but this storm was intense and something larger got through. The meteor struck the hull of the research wing at tremendous speed. Metal screamed. The hull ruptured. The breach was only 6 inches across, but that was enough. Air began rushing out of the room with a sound like thunder. The sudden decompression pulled everything toward the hole. Papers, tools, and small equipment flew across the room and vanished into space. Hull breach in Research Wing Section 9. The computer announced, its calm voice at odds with the chaos. Emergency doors began closing throughout the station, sealing off the compromised section. But Derek and the 6 students were still inside. The door to the hallway slammed shut, trapping them in the breaching room. Krell was on the other side, his face visible through a small window in the door. He was shouting something but no sound came through the sealed barrier. The air pressure was dropping fast. Derek's ears popped painfully. Around him, the other students were panicking. Ven collapsed, their breathing apparatus torn away by the rushing air. Cass was holding onto a table leg, their body being pulled toward the breach. Then the secondary systems failed. A coolant pipe, damaged by the meteor impact, ruptured. Freezing liquid sprayed into the room, instantly turning to vapor in the low pressure. The temperature began dropping rapidly. Frost formed on the walls. At the same time, a gas canister that had been part of their research project cracked under the pressure change. Yellowish smoke poured out, a toxic compound that was safe in small amounts but deadly in high concentration. Derek had perhaps 15 seconds before the air became too thin to breathe. He could see the other students already struggling, their various respiratory systems failing in the thin, poisoned atmosphere. Zilk's antennae were turning blue from lack of oxygen. Cess's methane suit was collapsing. Prex's crystalline structure was cracking from the rapid temperature drop. Most creatures would have panicked. Most would have tried to reach the sealed door and bang on it uselessly. Derek's mind went calm and clear, the way it did when things got dangerous back on Earth. He took the deepest breath his lungs could hold, then stopped breathing entirely. Humans could hold their breath. It was a skill left over from ancestors who dove for food in oceans and rivers. Derek had practiced swimming underwater as a child. His personal record was 2 minutes and 40 seconds in a pool. He would need every second of that now. The cold hit him next. The temperature in the room was already below freezing and dropping fast. Derek's exposed skin burned with the cold. His fingers started going numb. But he had been camping in winter before. He had felt cold that made his bones ache. This was worse but not unimaginably worse. He moved toward the hull breach, fighting against the wind of escaping air. The suction was powerful, trying to pull him off his feet. He grabbed onto a bolted-down table and used it to anchor himself. The breach was in an awkward spot, high on the wall near a support beam. In the rapidly failing light, Derek could barely see it. The emergency lighting was flickering and frost was forming on every surface, making everything slippery. Derek pulled off his belt and wrapped it around the table leg, creating a tether. Then he climbed onto a chair, then onto the table, working his way higher. His movements were slow and deliberate. Rushing would waste energy and oxygen he did not have. 30 seconds had passed. His lungs were starting to burn. He reached the breach and examined it in the dim light. The hole was jagged, the metal torn outward by the meteor's impact. He could see stars beyond it, cold and distant. Air was screaming past him into the vacuum. Derek looked around for something to plug the hole. A piece of their project equipment, a metal plate, was stuck to the wall nearby, held by the frost. He pried it free with numb fingers and pressed it against the breach. It was not big enough. Air still whistled around the edges. 45 seconds. His vision was starting to blur at the edges. Derek took off his shirt, balled it up, and stuffed it around the edges of the metal plate. Then he pressed his whole body against the patch, using his weight to hold everything in place. The suction from the breach helped, pulling him tight against the hull. The screaming wind began to quiet. The emergency foam systems, triggered by the breach, finally activated. White foam sprayed from nozzles in the ceiling, designed to seal any gaps. The foam hit Derek's makeshift patch and hardened instantly in the cold, creating an airtight seal. The decompression stopped. 1 minute, 15 seconds. Derek's lungs were screaming for air, but he could not breathe yet. The atmosphere in the room was still toxic and too thin. He climbed down from the wall and ran to the environmental controls panel. His frozen fingers could barely work the buttons. He activated the emergency air reserves and turned the ventilation to maximum purge. Fresh air began pumping into the room. The toxic yellow gas was sucked into the filters. The pressure started rising. 1 minute, 40 seconds. Black spots danced in Derek's vision. His body was demanding that he breathe, but he forced himself to wait. The air had to be safe first. The environmental panel turned from red to yellow to green. Atmosphere breathable at red. Derek let out his held breath and gasped in fresh air. His lungs burned. His head spun. He fell to his knees, coughing and shaking. But he could not rest yet. He looked around the room at the other students. Ven was unconscious on the floor. Cass was barely moving. Zilk had curled into a ball, her legs wrapped around herself. Cessa's suit was nearly empty. Prex had several cracks running through their crystalline body. Derek forced himself to stand. His legs did not want to work. His whole body was shaking from cold and oxygen deprivation. But he moved to Ven first, checking for a pulse or whatever the student species used for circulation. There. Faint but present. Derek positioned Ven for better breathing and moved to the next student. He went to each one, checking their conditions, moving them into recovery positions, doing what little first aid he knew. His own body was approaching shock, but he kept working until he was sure all 5 students were stable. The emergency door finally opened. Krell rushed in with a medical team behind him. They stopped in the doorway, staring at the scene. The room was a disaster. Frost covered everything. The hull breach was sealed with a crude patch of metal, cloth, and foam. Equipment was scattered everywhere. And in the middle of it all, Derek sat on the floor in just his pants, his skin pale blue from cold, checking on the other students. Medical assistance needed, Derek said calmly, though his voice shook. Ven needs oxygen support. Cessa's suit needs methane refill. Prex has structural damage. The others are stable but should be checked. The medical team rushed forward with equipment and began treating the students. One medic scanned Derek with a handheld device and her eyes went wide. Your core temperature is dangerously low, she said. You have minor frostbite on your extremities. Your blood oxygen levels were critically low until moments ago. You should be in shock or unconscious. Derek looked down at his blue-tinged fingers. Yeah, I am pretty cold. Do you have a blanket? Another medic was examining the hull breach patch. Did you seal this? He asked Derek. Had to, Derek replied simply. The air was getting out. You held your breath during a decompression event, the first medic said slowly. In near-vacuum conditions. In sub-zero temperatures. While exposed to toxic gas. It was only for about 2 minutes, Derek said. Maybe a bit less. I tried to work fast. Krell knelt down beside Derek, wrapping a thermal blanket around the human's shoulders. You should be dead, Krell said quietly. The conditions in this room would kill any known species in seconds. Derek pulled the blanket tighter, grateful for the warmth. It was not fun, he admitted. But camping in the mountains back home can get pretty cold. And I did swim team for a few years, so holding my breath is not too hard. Just had to stay calm and fix the problem. Stay calm, Krell repeated. He looked around at the room that had nearly become a tomb. You stayed calm while facing 4 different lethal conditions simultaneously. Well, panicking would not have helped, Derek said reasonably. The medical team loaded the injured students onto gurneys and prepared to transport them to the medical bay. Derek tried to stand, but his legs gave out. The medics caught him and made him lie down on a gurney as well. I can walk, Derek protested. Your body temperature is 15 degrees below safe levels for your species, the medic said firmly. You are going to medical whether you like it or not. As they wheeled him out, Derek looked back at the sealed breach one more time. Someone should probably do a permanent repair on that, he said. My patch will hold for now, but it is not exactly up to code. Krell watched them take the human away and then looked at his datapad. He began writing his report but stopped after the first sentence. How did you write in official terms that a student had survived the unsurvivable? That a human had done in 2 minutes what should have required a full emergency response team? He settled for the simple truth: human students are not fragile. They are something else entirely. Something the galaxy is not prepared for. And we are very lucky they are on our side. The Academy board meeting room was filled with representatives from a dozen different species. They sat in specialized chairs and breathing environments, all focused on the holographic display at the center of the table. Video footage played showing the research wing incident, the gravity disaster, and the chemical spill. In each case, one figure moved through conditions that should have been impossible. Instructor Krell stood before the board, his 4 arms holding data pads filled with reports and observations. He had been teaching at Galactic Academy for 15 cycles and had never faced a decision like this. The human student presents an unusual situation, Board Director Thane said, her scaled head tilting to examine the footage again. 3 major incidents in less than 1 galactic month. Some members suggest the human is too dangerous to remain in the program. With respect, Director, Krell replied, Derek did not cause any of these incidents. He resolved them. Without him, we would have lost students in each case. A board member named Kix, whose species breathed chlorine gas, made a bubbling sound of disagreement. But his very presence seems to attract disaster. And his capabilities are far beyond what we designed this academy to handle. Krell had spent many nights thinking about this exact point. I believe, he said carefully, that we have been looking at this incorrectly. The human is not the problem. Our understanding is the problem. He pulled up a new display showing Earth's planetary classification. The words Class 12 Deathworld appeared in large letters. We see this classification in files and accept it as bureaucratic labeling, Krell continued. But we do not truly understand what it means. A Class 12 Deathworld is a planet where survival requires constant adaptation to lethal conditions. Earth has extreme weather, dangerous predators, toxic substances in the environment, and regular natural disasters. Humans evolved to handle all of this as normal. Another board member, a crystalline being named Ceph, pulsed with curious yellow light. Are you suggesting the human's actions were normal for his species? I am suggesting, Krell said, that what we consider emergencies humans consider minor problems. What we consider lethal they consider manageable. Derek was not being reckless or showing off. He was simply applying the survival skills his entire species develops as children. Director Thane leaned forward. What do you recommend, Instructor Krell? I recommend we keep Derek in the program, Krell said firmly. But more than that, I recommend we change how we teach. We have been trying to protect Derek from dangers he is already equipped to handle. Instead, we should learn from him. His species has knowledge about survival that the rest of the galaxy desperately needs. The board members looked at each other, communicating in the various ways their species used. Finally, Director Thane spoke. The board will consider your recommendations. In the meantime, you may continue with your current class. But we want a full presentation from the human student about his homeworld. We need to understand what we are dealing with. 3 days later, Derek stood at the front of a lecture hall filled with students and faculty. His arm was still in a sling from the dislocated shoulder, and he had bandages on his frost-damaged fingers, but he seemed otherwise recovered. Behind him, a large screen displayed an image of Earth from space, blue and green and beautiful. So this is home, Derek began, his voice calm and conversational. Earth is the 3rd planet from our sun, and it is where humans evolved over millions of years. He clicked to the next image showing a hurricane from above. Our weather can be pretty extreme. These are called hurricanes or typhoons depending on where they form. Winds over 200 kilometers per hour, waves 10 meters high, enough rain to flood entire cities. They happen every year. In the audience, Zilk made a small sound of distress. Every year? She asked. Oh yeah, Derek confirmed. We have a season for them. People who live in hurricane zones just prepare and either evacuate or shelter in place. It is part of life. He clicked to the next slide showing a tornado. These are tornadoes. They form quickly and can destroy buildings in seconds. Wind speeds over 300 kilometers per hour sometimes. Another click. These are earthquakes. The ground just shakes and splits open. Buildings fall down. Cess's translator crackled. How do you survive if your planet attacks you regularly? Derek shrugged. We build structures to withstand it. We have warning systems. We teach kids what to do from a young age. In school, we practice earthquake and tornado drills the same way you practice fire drills here. He moved to the next section of his presentation. Earth also has a lot of dangerous animals. Images of lions, bears, sharks, and crocodiles appeared on screen. These are all predators that can kill humans pretty easily. They live on every continent except Antarctica. And humans still live in those areas? Prex asked, pulsing with confused orange light. Well, yeah, Derek said. We learn to avoid them or protect ourselves. Sometimes we have to scare them off. Usually they leave us alone if we are smart about it. Instructor Krell, sitting in the front row, asked his own question. What about the chemical dangers you mentioned? The cleaning products you said were common in homes. Derek pulled up a new slide showing various household items. Right, so these are normal things in most houses. Bleach, ammonia, drain cleaner, oven cleaner. They're all pretty corrosive or toxic. Every bottle has warning labels. Kids learn not to touch them or mix them. Adults use gloves and make sure there is ventilation. Children live in the same dwelling as these substances? Director Thane asked from the back of the room. Sure, Derek replied. I mean, you keep them in cabinets or high shelves where little kids cannot reach. But by the time you are maybe 8 or 9 years old, you learn how to use them safely. It is just part of growing up. He clicked to the next slide, showing a simple chart. Earth's atmosphere is about 21% oxygen. I know that is high compared to most planets. Our gravity is pretty strong too, stronger than galactic standard. Our sun puts out radiation that would burn a lot of species' skin in minutes. We just call it sunlight and go outside anyway. A student in the back raised a tentacle. How do you protect yourselves from all these dangers? Mostly we just pay attention, Derek said. We learn what is dangerous and how to handle it. We wear protective gear when needed. We use common sense. Most of the time, if you are careful and respect the danger, you will be fine. Krell stood up. Derek, can you explain what you were thinking during the hull breach incident? Walk us through your decision-making process. Derek thought for a moment. Okay, so when the breach happened, I knew we had maybe 15 seconds before the air got too thin. I assessed what needed to happen. Seal the breach, protect the other students, survive until help arrived. I have held my breath for over 2 minutes before, so I knew I could do the work without breathing if I stayed calm. The cold was bad, but I have been in below freezing temperatures before while hiking. I just had to move fast and not panic. You make it sound simple, Krell said quietly. It was not simple, Derek admitted. It hurt and it was scary. But it was solvable. The problem had a solution, so I focused on that instead of on being afraid. Director Thane stood from her seat. Human Derek, your presentation has been very educational. I think I speak for the entire board when I say we had no true understanding of what a Deathworld species actually means. She looked around at the assembled students and faculty. The board has made a decision. Derek will remain in the academy program. Furthermore, we are creating a new position in our emergency response division. We are offering Derek a role as assistant instructor for crisis management and survival techniques. The room filled with surprised sounds from various species. Derek looked stunned. You want me to teach? He asked. We want you to share what your species knows about surviving impossible situations, Director Thane clarified. Your people have evolved skills that the rest of the galaxy desperately needs to learn. Skills like staying calm under pressure, working in hostile environments, and solving problems when standard procedures fail. Krell nodded in agreement. The galaxy is a dangerous place. We have tried to make it safer through technology and protocols. But we have forgotten how to actually survive when those systems fail. Humans remember. Humans know. We need that knowledge. Derek looked around at the faces or face equivalents watching him. Zilk was clicking her mandibles with what he had learned was approval. Sessa's methane suit bubbled with excited agreement. Prex pulsed bright, happy gold. I guess I can do that, Derek said slowly. But I am not an expert or anything. I am just a regular person from Earth. That, Krell said with something that might have been a smile on his alien features, is exactly the point. If you are a regular human and you can do what you have done, then your species has capabilities we cannot even imagine. It is time the galaxy learned what Deathworlders really are. Derek nodded and looked back at the image of Earth on the screen behind him. Okay then. Lesson 1 is going to be about acceptable risk assessment. Because I think we have very different ideas about what is actually dangerous. The students pulled out their various note-taking devices. For the first time in Galactic Academy history, they were about to learn that safety was not about avoiding all danger. It was about understanding danger, respecting it, and knowing that sometimes the scariest situations were survivable if you just kept your head and did the work. And they were learning it from a species that considered corrosive chemicals, extreme weather, and deadly predators to be normal parts of childhood. The galaxy, Krell thought as he watched Derek begin his first real lesson, was about to discover that humans were not just durable. They were what happened when a species spent millions of years learning that impossible simply meant difficult, and difficult simply meant you had to try harder. It was a lesson the galaxy needed. And Derek, a simple human who just wanted to learn and help others, was exactly the right teacher.